the page. Kumlan Ablat Gemorit, would say Shabbos Kedesh, Shabbos Shira, Parshas B'Shalach. Today's daf is Daf Yud Beis, the very bottom of the page. Now, what in the world does this Gemara have to do with our Mishnah? Because later on we're going to bring up our Mishnah. And it's as follows. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Bar Yosef. Rabbi Yitzchak son Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yechon, in the name of Rabbi Yechon, said, if somebody says to his shliach, to his agent, say, go out there, v'kadesh li isha, I want you to go out there and find me a wife. Stam. He didn't give any specific instructions. He just said, find somebody suitable. Here's a ring. Give them the ring on my behalf. In fact, he can give a ring. We're learning more Kedushin of Zion that he can do it as well on your behalf, even his own money. And go ahead and go ahead to the Kedushin. Also, b'chal nashim shebayim. This man now cannot marry any woman in the world. What happened was the shliach didn't come back home. He died. We have an assumption, so we have an assumption that a shliach does the shlichus, and according to many Rishonim, it's Mahatorah. So we don't know who he got engaged to you, and therefore, the Kivin Lepadishle, since he didn't spell out which girl he wanted to engage, he could have gone to anyone. You have no idea. We assume definitely he found a shidduch for you, but we have no idea to whom. And therefore, you cannot marry any woman in the world because they might be the sister, the mother, the daughter of, or the grandmother of the person that he was mekadesh on your behalf. Now, the simple question that everybody asks is: we have a rule that you go after the majority. The vast majority of the women are not involved at all. So what's the problem? Why can't you marry a woman and assume that this woman is not related to this to the woman that the shlech was mekadesh on your behalf? So there's a big machlekes Rishonim. Many hold that we don't rely on roiveh because a woman is more, as we'll see in the Gemara soon, is more considered like a kavua. We had a rule in Gemara Ksubis that even though if you have 9 stores sell kosher meat and one that sells treif, and you found a piece of meat lying in the street, we'll assume called the parish, meruv parish, it came from the majority. But if you couldn't remember, you cannot recollect which store you walked into, you're absentmindedly walking into a store you purchased, then we say you cannot eat the meat. Even though 9/10 of the stores are kosher, is because we say kol kavua kemechza mechza, because wherever the suffix began is in a fixed place, and we have a pasuk in the Torah that teaches us that regardless of if majority or not majority, if it's fixed place, it's a suffix, it's kemechza mechza, like a half and half, and therefore a woman generally is at home. So it's not exactly, but it's like a fixed place, and therefore every woman we're going to be machmir that maybe she is the one that's us. Taisha, however, learns that it's only a penalty. You're right, because otherwise, then no woman should also be able to get married. Every woman, maybe she is marrying a guy that maybe she's marrying the guy that her sister was engaged to this guy. How could she marry this guy? Nobody should be able to marry him either, and so on. It doesn't bother us because we just this whole thing is merely a penalty. In other words, the case is a simple question: how can anybody marry any girl? Maybe that girl was one who already got engaged to this guy. Even though you can ask the girl, you can't believe her about herself. Maybe she's lying. So therefore, Taisha says, I believe this whole thing is merely a penalty. It's only on this person here because he should have been more specific, given better instructions. Now, and this actually knocks on the head. There's a famous question that everybody asks, and the famous answer that everybody gives, and that is, in Haggadah, we say that Lavan tried to destroy the entire Jewish nation, and everybody asks, Shenemar Arami Ovid Avi, that Arami, Lavan, where Rashi learns, tried to destroy us. Where does the Torah in the entire story of Yaakov and Lavan show that Lavan wanted to kill everybody? It doesn't show that. So they all say, because they wanted to poison Eliezer. Eliezer was a shliach sent by Avram to marry Yitzchak. If Eliezer would have died, wouldn't return home, then Yitzchak couldn't marry anybody because everyone might be related to the girl that Eliezer found. That's the answer generally everybody gave. So that's how Lavan wanted to destroy everybody. Apart from it, it's not right because Rashi tells us it was Besuel who tried to poison Eliezer, not Lavan. So we should have said Besuel, Lavan's father tried to poison us. Apart from that, we see it clearly from here. It's only when you didn't give any specific instructions. Avram said clearly, go to the family. Rivka has family there. Don't go to Canaan. Just go to that family. So if worst comes to worst, you cannot marry anybody in that family, but could have married other girls. So therefore, that answer is very weak. But let's continue the Gemara. So this is what Rabbi Yechon said. His brother-in-law Shlakish said to him, I don't understand. I have a question for you. It says, Kain Stuma, if you have, let's say, a woman who is a Zava she menstruated outside of a normal period, or a zav, a male, or a woman gives birth, she has to bring a twin set of birds. One will be an oile, one will be a chatas. It's called a cane. So what happens? She set aside two birds and didn't specify which is the oile, which is the chatas. And what happened was that sheparcha, and suddenly what happened was one of the birds flew out in the world, and now we don't know which bird it went, which bird it was, and flew away. Or sheparcha bechatois and maces. There were five. We learned in Gemara Zvach that there are five different kinds of chatois that we put to death. For example, if the owner, the person who did the sin, died, there's no point in bringing the chatas now, so we let the chatas die. Or, for example, they lost it, so they bought another one, and then they recovered this one. There's no point in bringing two chatois for the same incident, so we let it die. So this bird flew amongst the chatois amesis and got all mixed up. Now we don't know which one is the right bird to take it back. Or Shemes Echmen, one of the two birds died. You don't know which one. So what do? Yikach zug l'sheni. You find another bird. You purchase another bird, and you join it together, and you make one the chatas. Since you didn't specify one the chatas and one of the oila. V'ilu kain mefureshes. What happens if you already specify this will be an oila and the chatas? Then ain le takana. There's nothing you can do. You cannot buy another one because you don't know which is the one that died. Was it the oila, the chatas? There's no way that you can actually remedy it, right? You don't know which is what. Now the question is the ilu shar kene ba'alma misaknin, but nevertheless everybody else can buy a bird. Why? Now, how can anybody ever buy a bird? Maybe the bird that they're going to buy is the bird that flew from your nest or from your twin, and they're using your oila, your chatas. How can anybody buy a bird? Every person, every bird that they'll find, maybe he just came from this thing. If you're going to be worried even about a minority, why aren't you worried in this case as well? Now, this will make sense if we follow the way we learned before, that we don't follow the majority. We just say that it asks all the women in the world, it asks all the birds in the world. But Taisha said the whole thing is a penalty. So where does this come in over here? So we're saying here that it's talking about that this very same person has to bring tomorrow another set. At least this person who was penalized, he should not be able to buy any more birds in the future, because every bird that he'll buy, maybe it's the bird that escaped from his first set. And we only penalize him, but maybe he can't use it because he'll be penalized. Anyway, so the question is, what's the difference between the case of the birds you're allowed to buy a bird and the case of women say he can never marry anybody? What's the difference? Amalei, Rabbi Yechon responded along the lines we said before. Kamina Naisha, I'm talking about a woman, the loy 90, that generally doesn't move about, so she's fixed in a certain place, and therefore it's a kavua, and we know that kavua kamach samachsadami, right? Because the women generally are home, and probably that's where the shotgun went, or that's where they go to marry her, or that's where or you want to go and marry her, and therefore it's forbidden because it's mechza, it's half and half. Maybe this is the girl that got engaged previously. However, you're asking me a question. You sort of deny from birds that keep on flying around. They're flying around. We always follow majority. Who said that you met her at home? Maybe you'll meet a girl in the marketplace. This is also moving about. She found the marketplace with Kaddish and get engaged to her. There's still a difference. The woman might wander around the marketplace and meander her way through there, but then eventually she'll go back home. Her primary residence is a permanent place. Birds keep on flying about; they have no home. They're constantly flying. So they're always considered, free flying, and therefore you always follow majority. Nevertheless, Rabbi Yechon is moide when we say you cannot marry any woman in the world. It's not any woman. He's moide, for example, a woman a woman that has no family, no daughters, no granddaughters. So then, what are you worried about? This particular woman says nothing happened to her. You're worried about her daughter doesn't have a daughter, doesn't have a granddaughter. Doesn't have a mother. Not a baba. Not a sister. Now he goes one step further and makes a big chiddush. What happens if she has a sister, but that sister is married? That sister was married at the time when the Mishalech, the sender, asked the Shliach, go out there and find me a shidduch. Now, at that moment, he wanted, obviously, to find a shidduch, a girl that's available. So he had no intention of the Shliach, going to find women that were married that time. So even though the shliach didn't arrive there till a month later, the fact of the matter is, I never gave you the right to find me a woman that was at the time that I appointed you wasn't suitable for me. Even though later on it was suitable, that's not who I'm interested in. Therefore, says the Gemara here, that this woman that you want to marry now, even though she has a sister who was now divorced, but if her sister was married at the time you appointed a shliach, then definitely the shliach would not have gone to that person, or even if gone, you never appointed him a shliach for that purpose, because the shliach can only serve you, and you only thought about people that were suitable at the time. So therefore, you can marry this girl. She has a sister who is divorced right now. It doesn't matter. I never gave the shliach the right, since your sister was married at the time that I appointed the shliach. I never gave the shliach the right to go ahead and give kedushin to such a woman. And even if he did, it's meaningless because he's not acting up for me. So that's what it says. If she had a sister, then his gosh was divorced. Afterwards, at the time when I deputized the shliach, I didn't. She was a married woman. That woman, then you can marry the woman whose sister is now divorced, because definitely she's not related to you whatsoever. So I don't understand. My time of why? The reason is because at that moment when I deputized the shliach, having a civil legabi, if she's a married woman to a man. So kimash shliach, generally when I appoint a shliach, what am I thinking? What's going through my mind? The milsa the kaima kamei, things that are suitable now. The milsa the like kaima kamei, things which are not suitable now. I didn't appoint you as a shliach. So Gemara is working its way now as if it's to do with your intent. And my intent when I appointed a shliach cannot work beyond what I gave him, the powers that I gave him. And what my intent was to marry me, to find a shidduch for me, someone who's available now. And since this woman is a married woman now, obviously I didn't mean her at all. So her sister, I can definitely marry because nothing could have gone wrong. So yeah, that's so simple. You look at a person's mind. Let me ask a question. So now we learn in the Mishnah. Now this is why we're talking about this Gemara, because we relate back to our Mishnah. We learned yesterday in the Mishnah, if a person says, Hareni Nazir, a person says, I am a Nazir, number one, and then he said, plus I plan to contribute to the animals of a Nazir. Then Mishama Chabela, your friend, heard it very inspired, and he said, I also will be a Nazir, and I take upon myself the animals of a Nazir. So the Mishnah says, they were intelligent, they were smart. Megalchim says, if they were smart, they would just take care of each other's kabbanis. It's quite expensive business. 3 animals you have to bring. So Reuven takes care of Shimon takes care of Reuven, and everybody's happy. Now the question is very simple. You're telling me that a person's intent is only things that are available at the moment. So there's Reuven and Shimon. Reuven was the first person, and he said, I'll become a Nazir and I'll pay half that. I'll pay for the animals. And then Shimon came along and said, I also will be a Nazir and I will pay for the animals. Okay. So Shimon already knew that Reuven was a Nazir. So when he said, I'll pay for the animals, it could very well be he'll pay for Reuven's animals. But Reuven, at the time when he made the vow, Shimon wasn't a Nazir yet. And if you're telling me that a person's intent is only what was available at that moment, then how can you tell me in the Mishnah that if Reuven was smart, he would use the money and pay for Shimon's animals? He can't do that because his promise was limited to only Nazirim who were already existing Nazirim, the way you're telling me how people think. So now there's a question. Not to have to pay, not to pay for other people's animals. Now the more asks, I understand Shimon, the second person, before there was Reuven, who's already an existing Nazir. It doesn't matter if it's 2 minutes long. Okay, so I'm going to pay for his animals. But Reuven, how can Reuven be paying for Shimon's animals at the time when Reuven made the vow? Shimon wasn't a Nazir. So you're going to have to say to me, this is what he meant. He didn't mean that at this moment they have to be a Nazir. When I'm ready to pay the money, if I find that somebody at that time is a Nazir, good enough. I will pay for his animals. So if so, the same with the woman. Doesn't matter that this woman is now married when I deputize the shliach. All that matters is when by the time the shliach got to that town, was that woman still married? She was divorced. So why can't he have intention also for that person? So Hachanami is here too. Isn't this what he's telling the shliach? If you find a woman that's divorced, I want you to give her a mekadosh for me if you think she's suitable. So the Gemara now says, you're right. It's not a question of people's intent. It's more a legal question. An interesting machlekes in the Ksosah Choshen, how he explains the Rambam and the Tur. I can't remember if he brings this Gemara here or not. And that is, there's an argument in the Rambam and the Tur. What happens if the husband asked the shliach, wrote a proper bill of divorce, gave it to the shliach, and said, "Present this to my wife who lives in another city. Please bring it to her." In the interim, the husband suddenly lost his mind. An accident, something happened, lost his mind. Now, when a person loses their mind, they're not in a position to give a get. But the question is, when he gave the power to the shliach, he empowered the shliach and he said, "You have a power of attorney. You can take this get." He was full control of his faculties. Now, somewhere in the interim, something changed. So there's an argument in the Rambam the Torah if the get is valid or not. And the argument with the Ktsos learns is basically based on the following question: When do you empower the shliach? When you deputize him, or when the shliach actually implements it and puts it into effect? So if it's when you deputize him, well, I was perfectly sane at the time, control my faculties, it's a valid get. But if it's at the time when the shliach gave the get, at that time already the husband is no longer in the position. But the Gemara here is going to say that a mishalech can only give to the shliach the power that he has at that moment. At that moment, the sender, could he have married that woman? No, she was a married woman. So when you empower the shliach, you only gave him the capabilities to do things that you can do at that moment. So therefore, if a week later this woman is now divorced, you never gave the shliach the power to give meshadach that woman to you, because at the time when I appointed the shliach, that woman was a married woman. So we see from the Gemara here clearly that when does it happen? When do you empower shliach? The moment that you hire him or you ask him to do you the favor, not when he actually implements it. So the Gemara says, a person cannot appoint a shliach only if he himself can do it now. But the thing that he cannot do right now, he cannot appoint. Says the Gemara, and therefore that's why if this woman has only one sister who was married at the time he appointed the shliach, he allowed to marry this woman because the shliach couldn't have meshadach you to that woman, even though she divorced later. I never gave him that power. So Gemara of Allah is not so. Let me ask you a question. You're telling me that a husband cannot appoint. Remember, we had a whole discussion in the Gemara in the Darim. If kohenim work for us or for Hashem, because if it worked for us, we don't have the capacity to bring karbanos. How can they do it? So Tashma coming here. We had this Gemara in the Darim towards the end. If somebody says to an apatrufus, somebody's like an overseer of the state, and you say to him, I'm about to travel overseas, so all the Nadarim that my wife will make until I return. Remember, we have the two criteria: either she's self-harming or it directly affects their relationship. He says to the Petrufis, if she makes any Nadarim while I'm gone, I want you to know it. Hafala. The Hafala and the Petrufis did it. I would have thought that, yeah, I appoint him as a shliach. Tamalema says, we have a pasuk. Only the husband can annul, the husband can confirm. And Rabbi Yeshua says, what do you mean? We have a rule everywhere that a shliach shel adam kim is like him. Now, the whole reason is because the Torah says, according to Rabbi Yeshua, definitely have a problem. Clearly here, that a husband can appoint a shliach and apatrufus. Now, why is that an issue? We'll see in a minute. But even according to Rabbi Yeshua, the only reason why the husband cannot appoint him is because he have a pasuk. Had it not been for that pasuk, Rabbi Yeshua would concede that a husband can't appoint. Now, why is that a problem? Let's say the husband himself. Could a husband annul future nedarim? The Tanya, didn't we learn? If a guy says to his wife, all the nedarim that I will make in the future, should be confirmed. You cannot confirm the Darim that didn't happen yet, and it's not confirmed. And you don't really want to confirm. How do you know the neder is good? You want to hear it before you confirm. So it's nothing. However, where do you say what's the place? If I want to confirm it, I want to cancel it. Rabbi Lezer says, Mufir, canceling you can. And Chachamim say, Ein Mufir, the Chachamim say you cannot cancel if it didn't happen yet, you can't. Now, right now we think, when Rabbi Yeshua said, everyone's opinion follows the Rabbanan. That's halacha. So Rabbi Yeshua definitely follows the Rabbanan, and you could appoint a Petrufus. And even Rabbi Yeshua follows Rabbanan. You could have technically appointed a Petrufus had it not been for the pasuk. Now, Eli Rabbanan Amri Lamotzi Mefer. Now the problem is like this: the Rabbanan hold that the husband himself could not annul the neder. So how can it be that the husband cannot annul the neder because it didn't happen yet, and yet could empower an apotropos to annul the neder? How were you able to transfer a power that you yourself don't have? Doesn't that prove that it doesn't matter? We don't look at it at the time when you appoint him. We look at the time when it actually happens. When will apotropos annul the neder? After she made the neder. Had the husband been there at the time, he also could have annulled the neder. So we see from here that you're wrong. That a shlich is when do you empower the shlich? The time of the action. So we thought Ki Amar Rabbi Yeshua Libed Rabbanan, following even the opinion of Rabbanan, the Amri Leimotzi Mefer, that you cannot cancel. Now, the Elav Amar Rachmani Shekevei Shevran, had it not been for that pasuk, Apotrufus Avi Mefer. Even Rabbi Yeshua agrees that Apotrufus can cancel. My question is, but the husband can't do it. How can Apotrufus do it? Gemara answers back, this entire brisa does not follow the Rabbanan. The Ilma Eliba Rabbi Lezer. In fact, the entire brisa follows Rabbi Lezer. The husband has the right to do it. Motzi Mefer. He has the right to annul, pre-annul the nadar. He can do that. And based on the Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Yeshua doesn't have this argument, so can you appoint a shliach or not? Says the Gemara, if the husband has the right to do it, why bother appointing a shliach? Let him, if he has a right before he leaves on his trip to say, look, all the nadar you make till I come back are null and void. So what do you have to hire a patrufis? What do you have to do that? You just do it yourself. And what answers, Kesavar, he's worried, Dilma Mishtalina, maybe he will forget, or maybe I'll be angry, I'll be so preoccupied on my trip, I'll forget all about it. So the obvious question is, he didn't go on the trip yet. He's going to go on the trip. So why doesn't he just do it right now before he's busy? Obviously, if he has the mind to go ahead and ask that Petrufus do it for him, so he's in sound mind, why can't he just annul right now? If you hold that you're permitted to annul the Nadar. So Taisa says, he's not so clear, but Taisa seems to be saying that it's not a good thing to cancel the Nadar. What happens if it's a good Nadar and she wants to do it, why not please her? But if he's away on the trip, he has no choice. But if you're still home for another week together, and you just make this, this statement that all your nadarim are going to be null and void till I come back, which means there's a whole week that we're together, and I'm just going to make all your nadarim null. That's going to cause a lot of dissension, and it's not. He doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to break up the shalom bayis. It's only when he's gone. Therefore, he can't do that. Next Mishnah. If a guy says, I will shave. I take upon myself the kabbanas of a half a nazir. My friend heard, and he said the same thing. I take upon myself the kabbanas of half a nazir. Each one has to pay the kabbanas of an entire nazir. What do you mean? So the way the Gemara will explain is, Rameir holds, you always listen to the first words that you say. The first word that you uttered was, that I will take care of the kabbanas. That's a full contribution for all the kabbanas. And then you change your mind, you said chatzi nazir, only half. Rameir holds, you listen to the first words, you're trying to cancel what you said, it doesn't work. However, the Chachamim say listen to the entire sentence. You're explaining yourself. I never meant to pay for all the animals, I meant I'll pay half. Chachamim means each one meant only half. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava says Rava like this. How come everyone agree? If a person says, half of the kabbanas of a nazir, I will pay for half of the kabbanas. There's no dispute. Chatzi carbon maisi, then of course you only pay for half the kabbanas. You clearly said that. If you said karbanas chatzi nazir alai, if he said the kabbanas of a half a nazir, I take upon myself. What's a half a nazir? Then kula carbon boy. Everyone agrees there's no such thing as a half a nazir. Everyone agrees that what? That you have to bring a full carbon. My time, and why is that? The hola ashkan, we don't find the zirs of palka. We don't find the zirs halfway. So keep pligi. They're only arguing in the language in our Mishnah. Pligi. Rameir holds, Kivan Amar, he said, Harei alai. The moment you say, I take upon myself to bring the kabbanas, you're obligated to pay for all the kabbanas. Then he says, Chatzin is only half. Lav kol kamin is not believed. The Rabban hold, neder pesach imahu. Rabban hold, no, this is a neder, and he explains himself straight away. Next Mishnah. Hareini nazir. I'm a nazir likishayili ben. A person is very excited. Till now, we learned that a person is a nazir because he has tzaras or he committed a sin, or the story of Shimon Tzaddik. He wanted to resist the temptations of the Yetzer Hara. Now we have a fourth type of nazir. Why is he becoming nazir? Because he wants to express his gratitude to the Rebbeinu Shalom, and he has a son. So he said, Hareini Nazir Kishiyili Ben. I'll be Nazir if I have a son. But Noile Ben, and he had a son. Nope, Harez a Nazir. What about Noile Bas? Instead of a son, he had a daughter or a tumtum or someone that we cannot tell what their gender is, or Adregan is have both signs of both genders, then ain't a Nazir, he's not a Nazir because you said a son. In fact, the Gemara is going to ask, what's the point of this mission? Everything here is obvious. What happens? He says, he says, Kishiyili Vlad. He didn't say a son. He said, well, I have a child. Then I feel the bas is making it a daughter. He's another because he said a child. Again, what's the mission trying to tell us? What about he pila ishtay? The woman miscarried. What do you mean the woman miscarried? She had a child, and let's say reached the full gestation period, and then the child came out, lived for a couple of minutes, and died. Now we don't know, was the child should have lived properly as a fully developed child, and the only reason why it didn't is something happened externally, or the child itself was never fully developed. But he said a child. So do we we don't know, is this a child or not? Ain't a nazir. If you remember, Rabbi Yehuda said that if we're not sure, you said something, carry this, you said if I have so much quantity of crop on my field and then it was stolen and you have no idea. You say you're not a nazir because people want to be definitive. They don't want suffix nazir. So in this case, you're not a nazir. But Rav Shimon says a suffix nazir is were machmir. So Rav Shimon says maybe you should be a nazir, but it's a problem. You can't just say I'll be a nazir because if you're a nazir l'chumra, you cannot bring the karbanos to the base of Mikdash. Because you cannot bring an animal based on Mikdash unless we know definitely you're obligated to bring the animal. But we're not even sure this child, was an living child, and you're a nazir or not a nazir. So what do you do? So Shimon said, "This is what you do. You are going to declare, I am becoming a nazir, and you say as follows: If this child was really a living child, I'm a nazir because I made a promise previously. If the child is not a living child, then I'm a nazir because now I decided to become a nazir." Not totally. So either way, I'm a full-fledged nazir, so I can bring my korbanos. Rav Shimon says, "Yema, you say the following: If ben kayama, the child was a fully developed child, had any nazir chayva, then I'm an obligated. Then I'm a nazir. If not, had any nazir the dove, I'm a voluntary nazir. What happens then with twins? And the first baby came out and died, but the second one survived. Do we automatically say that the second one came out and survived proves that the first one also was a full-fledged baby? And there just something happened, externally and outside the body, and it was not natural causes, and therefore you should be a nazir from the first child? Or do we say no? Or do we say maybe the first child was not fully developed, only the second one? So you're nazir because of the second child. But the problem is, according to Rav Shimon, you already accepted nazir straight away as soon as the first child is born. So now the second child, what do? If the first child was not, you made a promise that if I have a child and I had twins, I will be a nazir. But you became a nazir after the first child who was miscarried. But if you did it on a voluntary basis, then you still haven't fulfilled your promise yet. But if you did the first child on a mandatory basis, then there's no reason to be a nazir the second time. But you don't know what happened. So we're going to be a nazir again. And you are going to say the same manoshach. It goes follows. Chazav Yoda had a nazir. If you had another child, you're a nazir. Rab Shimon says, according to the rabbis, yes, because this child survived. You're chayiv. Rab Shimon says, depends on this. This is what you say. According to Rab Shimon, you already took upon yourself nazir. So now you take a second one and you say the following: If the first one was a ben kayama child that should have lived, and the rishon chayva, then my promise was for the first one was in but I'll still do another naziris on a voluntary basis. But the first child didn't live, and I took that naziris on a voluntary basis. This is the mandatory. So just a little bit of the Gemara. Hi, remember, what do you tell me? What's the point of all this? Of course, if you said I'll be a nazir if I have a son. If you have a son, you're a nazir. What's the point? Says the Gemara Mishum Sefer. The chiddush is the Sefer that if Basi had a daughter or a tumtum or a is questionable, they're a girl or boy, then ain't a nazir. You're not a nazir. Says Gemara, that's the chiddush. Pshit isn't that obvious? You said a boy. They're not boys. No. Ma'od Tema. Sometimes you use the word ben. You don't mean necessarily a son. You can use bonim for boys and girls, because banim means likshe'evnim. When I will build my family, that's why banim can include girls as well, because banim can also be just like an adjective or a description. That I'm building my family, regardless, boy, girl. No, when you say I'm going to be a nazir, sheheli ben means a boy. The imama kishiyili vlad, if he's a child, pshita, a child, anybody, doesn't cover everybody. No, I would have thought vlad the mechshev, I want a boy amongst men. Even though he said child, he meant the boy. Kamashlan doesn't work that way. Okay, we'll stop over here.